Rae Parker checked her phone for the fourth time in 5 minutes, tapping the screen with growing frustration. 10 more minutes, she muttered, setting it face down on the café table. Her friend Mia was late. Again. The cozy coffee shop buzzed with the morning rush muffled conversations, clinking cups, and the hiss of steamed milk. Rae pulled her oversized cardigan tighter around her and took a sip of her vanilla latte. She was trying to stay calm, but after the week she'd had losing her internship, her car breaking down, and now this, she was teetering on the edge. She didn't notice the man sitting beside her at first. He had slipped into the seat near the window with quiet ease, dressed in a simple black button-down shirt and dark jeans. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms, and his dark hair was neatly styled. He looked calm, like nothing in the world could shake him. "Rough morning?" he asked, his voice deep but warm. Rae turned startled. "Was I being that obvious?" He gave a quick shrug. "You sighed 4 times in the last 2 minutes, I counted." Her cheeks flushed. "Right, sorry, don't be. I'm Simon Nolan." He held out a hand. She hesitated, then shook it. "Rae Parker." He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made time slow down just a little. "Nice to meet you, Rae Parker." She narrowed her eyes playfully. "You always introduce yourself to strangers in coffee shops. Only the ones who look like they're about to throw their phones at the wall." She laughed, relaxing a little. "My friend's late, again." "I should be used to it by now." Simon nodded, glancing out the window as if thinking about something. "Sometimes the best things happen while you're waiting." "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. He turned back to her. "Nothing. Just making conversation." Rae studied him, trying to figure him out. There was something about him, something grounded but polished. Not in an arrogant way, but in a way that said he didn't need to try. Like he belonged in a boardroom instead of a corner cafe. "So what do you do?" she asked, sipping her latte. Simon hesitated for the briefest second. "Consulting. I run a few companies." "Run as in manage or run as in own?" He chuckled. "Bit of both, depending on the day." Rae tilted her head. "That's vague. It's coffee shop conversation." "I thought vague was the point," she grinned. "Touché." They kept talking. Minutes turned into nearly an hour. Mia still hadn't shown up, but Rae barely noticed. There was something about Simon, his calm energy, his dry humor, the way he listened without interrupting, that made her want to keep talking. He asked questions that weren't surface level, and he actually waited for her answers. He waved over a barista. "You want another latte?" "I shouldn't." "But yes." He ordered for her without asking her card. When she opened her mouth to protest, he cut her off. "Let me. It's the least I can do after hijacking your wait." She raised an eyebrow. "You didn't hijack anything. I could have told you to leave." "But you didn't." "No." "I didn't." He gave her that smile again, and this time it did something to her chest. Rae leaned back in her chair. "So, Simon Nolan, the consulting mystery man, tell me something real." He looked surprised. "Something real?" "Yeah, no vague answers." "Who are you really?" He stared at her for a moment, then leaned forward slightly. "I'm someone who spends most of his days in rooms full of people who pretend to care. I make decisions that affect thousands of people. And most days, I feel like none of it matters as much as this moment does right now with you." Her breath caught. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed on the table. A message lit the screen. "Mia, sorry, something came up. Can't make it. You okay?" Rae blinked at it. Simon glanced at the phone, then back at her. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah, actually, I'm really okay." He leaned back, watching her like she was the most interesting thing in the room. "I'm glad I sat here." "Me too." Rae didn't know what this was or what it meant, but her heart was beating faster than it had in weeks. Somehow, in the middle of a disappointing morning, she'd stumbled into something unexpected, something possibly important. She didn't know that the man beside her was worth billions, or that his surname was whispered in corporate boardrooms across the country. She didn't know he owned the building this cafe was in, or that the watch on his wrist cost more than her rent. All she knew was this: she didn't want to leave yet, and Simon? He wasn't planning on letting her walk away. Not now. Not after this. Not after finally meeting the woman who made everything else in his world go quiet. Rae pressed her fingers lightly to the edge of the porcelain cup, unsure when the second latte had gone cold. The café had thinned out, chairs emptying as the lunch crowd trickled in. Simon glanced at his watch, then set it on the table like he wasn't in any rush. "You're not heading to work?" she asked, eyeing the time. "I shifted a few things around," she frowned. "You rearranged your schedule for this?" He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "You don't do that. I work for a design firm that barely pays its interns. If I cancel a meeting, I'm replaceable by noon." "You're not replaceable," he said without hesitation. She paused, caught off guard. "You don't know me." "Not yet." The words settled between them, heavier than they should have been. Rae cleared her throat and stood, brushing crumbs from her sweater. "I should go. I've got errands." Simon stood too. "Where are you headed?" "Just the fabric district. I'm helping a friend with a wedding shoot. She needs someone to pick up textiles." "I'll come with you," she blinked. "Why?" "Because it sounds more interesting than the meeting I'm avoiding. I'm not a tour guide." "Good, I hate tours." She hesitated, then shrugged. "Fine. But if you get bored, I'm not entertaining you. I'll take my chances." Outside, the air was brisk, the kind that hinted at rain without actually delivering it. Simon walked beside her without saying much, hands tucked in his pockets. Rae felt his presence more than anything, steady, quiet, and strangely comforting. They reached the strip of tightly packed shops, each one bursting with bolts of lace, velvet, and silk. Rae ducked into a narrow storefront and made her way straight to the back, flipping through swatches. Simon trailed behind her, eyeing the space. "You come here often." "Only when I can afford to, which is rarely." A short woman with a measuring tape around her neck approached. "You're early," she said, glancing at Rae. "I know, but I figured better now than never." Rae handed her a crumpled receipt. Simon wandered to a shelf stacked high with imported fabrics. "What's this for again?" "A wedding concept shoot." "I'm assisting the stylist." "You want to be a designer?" Rae nodded, pulling out a roll of embroidered tulle. "Eventually, but it's a long road and it's not exactly paved in gold." He ran a hand over the fabric. "You have an eye for detail." She tilted her head at him. "You can tell that from watching me pick lace." "I can tell because you haven't looked at your phone once." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she handed the clerk her card and winced when it beeped twice. "Try again," she said. The woman swiped it once more, then shook her head. "Declined." Rae pulled another card from her wallet, but Simon stepped forward. "I've got it." Before she could protest, he handed over his black card. The clerk's eyes widened slightly. "No, seriously, I can handle it," Rae said, reaching for the card. "It's fine." His voice was soft but firm. She stared at him as the machine beeped approval. Outside, she stopped him on the sidewalk. "You didn't have to do that." "I know. I'll pay you back." "You don't need to." "I want to." He studied her face, then nodded. "All right." "Call it a loan." She folded her arms. "You always loan strangers money." "You're not a stranger anymore." That shut her up. They walked in silence for a block. "You're different," she said finally. "In a good way." "I haven't decided yet." He laughed, and it was the first time she saw him loosen fully. They reached the subway entrance and she paused. "This is me." He looked at the stairwell like it was something foreign. "You take the train." "Most people do." He nodded slowly. "Let me send a car for you next time." "There won't be a next time." "There will." She narrowed her eyes. "You're very sure of yourself." "I'm rarely unsure." She shook her head with a half smile. "You're trouble." "Maybe, but I'm good trouble." She didn't reply. Just turned and took the stairs two at a time, not looking back. At the bottom, she leaned against the tiled wall and exhaled. She didn't know what just happened, or why she felt like she'd stepped into someone else's life for an afternoon, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going to be able to stop thinking about Simon Nolan, and he wasn't planning to disappear quietly. The next afternoon, Rae stood motionless at the edge of the rooftop garden, unsure whether she'd made a mistake. The sun dipped low over the skyline, casting a golden haze across the sculpted hedges and marble planters. It didn't feel like a place people just wandered into. It felt like a place someone had curated carefully, expensively, and with purpose. She had hesitated for a full hour before coming. But when a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb that morning and a driver handed her a sealed envelope with her name written in sharp, elegant handwriting, curiosity won. Inside had been a note, no signature, just, "Dinner, 7. You'll like the view." The view apparently was this. A secluded rooftop in Midtown, complete with a long linen-draped table set for two, delicate lights strung overhead, and a string quartet softly playing near a sculptural fountain. Simon appeared from behind an open-air bar, holding 2 glasses of something citrusy and chilled. He wore a navy shirt rolled at the cuffs, and tailored slacks that somehow made him look even more unreachable than he had the day before. "You came," he said, offering her the drink. "I wasn't sure I would," Rae replied, taking it but not sipping. "What convinced you?" "I wanted answers." "Fair," he gestured to the table. "Let's eat. I promise not to lie." She walked over cautiously, settling into the chair as he pulled it out for her. The table had no place cards, no menus. Just 2 perfect arrangements of white tulips. "I'm not used to this," she said, scanning the surroundings. "This is very not normal. It's not supposed to be. I mean, it's surreal. This place, the musicians, the car, it's too much." Simon studied her quietly. "You think I'm trying to impress you, aren't you?" "No, I'm trying to show you who I am." She finally took a sip of the drink. It was tart with a hint of lavender. "That's not the same thing. For most people it is, not for me." Rae leaned back, folding her arms. "You said you run companies. What kind?" He paused, then said, "Technology, real estate, logistics. I'm chairman on 5 boards, CEO of 2. Her hand froze mid-sip. "You're serious?" "I wouldn't lie to you, so you're rich." "I'm not poor. You own this building." He didn't answer. "Didn't have to." Rae set the glass down. "So what exactly are you doing with someone like me?" Simon's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped lower. "You think I only like people who float in the same circles? I think people like you don't usually notice people like me at all. You're wrong. I noticed you the second you looked like you were about to set your phone on fire." She laughed despite herself but caught it too quickly. "You're serious about all this? I wouldn't bring you here if I wasn't." "Why me, though?" He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Because you're not impressed by any of this. Because you're sharp enough to question it instead of pretending to belong. Because when you talk, you mean every word. You barely know me." "I know enough." Their food arrived, 2 silver domes lifted in perfect synchrony by silent staff. Rae blinked down at a dish of charred leeks over something creamy and unfamiliar. "I had them prepare something vegetarian," Simon said. "I wasn't sure what you liked. That's oddly considerate. I prefer not guessing." She picked up her fork slowly. "So what happens next?" "We sit here eating fancy food until one of us panics." "I don't panic." "Of course you don't," he smiled faintly. "What about you?" "I panic all the time, but you still came." "I guess I wanted to see if you were real." He watched her for a moment. "And I haven't decided yet." The quartet shifted to something soft and haunting. Rae took another bite and tried not to let herself be pulled in by the way he watched her, like she was the only thing that mattered. When dessert came, something small, rich, and covered in gold flakes, she set her fork down after one bite. "You keep doing things like this," she said. "Big, expensive things. But I don't need any of it, I know." "Then why do them?" "Because I want you to see the parts of my world that mean something to me, not the money, the intention." She didn't respond right away. Then, after a long silence, she asked, "What do you expect from me?" "Nothing." She raised an eyebrow. "That's a lie. I expect you to be exactly who you are." Rae stood slowly, walking to the edge of the rooftop. The city stretched out below her in every direction, lit windows, traffic gliding like rivers of light, the hum of something quiet and endless. Simon joined her after a moment. Neither of them spoke. Finally, she asked, "Are you always like this?" "No." "Then why with me?" Because I can't stop thinking about you, and that doesn't happen to me. She turned to face him. His expression was steady, but something in his eyes cracked just a flash of vulnerability, like he was giving her permission to see him, not just the version he presented. Rae stared at him, the rooftop spinning slower than it had any right to. "This is a mistake," she whispered. "Why? Because I don't know how to be what you need. I'm not asking you to be anything. But people like you always do." "I'm not people," her breath caught. "You should go," she said quietly. "I won't stop you." She didn't move, and neither did he. Rae stepped into the cavernous lobby of Nolan Tower, the heels she rarely wore echoing against the polished floor. She didn't belong here, anyone could see that, but she kept walking, clutching the simple envelope Simon's assistant had handed her only an hour earlier. No note this time. Just a key card and the words, "Penthouse. Tonight." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime and she stepped inside, scanning the buttons. There was only one option above the 40th floor, and her hand hovered for a breath before tapping it. When the doors slid open again, she found herself in a space that didn't look like it belonged in a skyscraper at all. The penthouse stretched wide with floor-to-ceiling windows framing the skyline, low music playing from somewhere unseen, and soft amber lights casting shadows across sleek furniture. But it wasn't the luxury that stopped her breath. It was the painting. Against one wall, lit by a single spotlight, hung a massive canvas her design. The one she'd sketched on a whim and left behind at the fabric shop weeks ago. She hadn't even realized she'd forgotten it. She heard his steps behind her before she turned. "I found it in the back room while picking up materials," Simon said. "They said you forgot it." "You framed it," she said, stunned. "No, I bought the space it was sitting in and had it delivered here." She turned sharply. "You what?" "I didn't want to leave anything of yours behind. That's not how people operate. I'm not people." She looked back at the painting, struggling to find the words. "You didn't come to the rooftop last week," he said. "I wasn't ready, and now, I don't know." "I'm still figuring it out." Simon stepped closer, but not too close. "I didn't bring you here to convince you of anything. I just wanted to show you something." He reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small, folded page. She took it hesitantly, unfolding it to find a newspaper clipping an article about Nolan Holdings donating a building to a community arts center in Queens. "The workshop they're building," he said. "It's for young designers, internships, mentors, studio space. Your name's already on the founding board." "I don't understand," she breathed. "Why would you do this?" "Because you said no one ever gave you a chance, so I built one." She sat down slowly on the edge of a velvet bench, her legs finally giving out. "You don't even know if I'll say yes." "I'm not doing this for a yes, I'm doing it because I want to." She looked up at him. "You don't get it. I've spent my whole life trying not to need anyone, and now she broke off, exhaling hard. "I don't know how to let someone like you in without losing myself." "You don't have to lose anything. I don't want to change you, Rae. I just want to be close enough to see what you build." She stared at him for a long moment before standing again, walking past him to the window. The city glittered below, uncaring and endless. But for the first time, it didn't feel like it was swallowing her whole. "What if I'm not enough?" she asked quietly. "You already are." She turned to face him again. "You're not afraid I'm just some phase?" "No. I'm afraid you'll walk away before I get to prove I'm not." He took a step closer then, slow and deliberate. "I haven't stopped thinking about you since that morning in the café, not once, and I've spent my whole life chasing things that don't mean anything, until you," her chest tightened. "You're serious." "I've never been more." Rae closed the distance between them herself, reaching up to touch the collar of his shirt, grounding herself in the moment. "I never wanted to need anyone," she murmured. "You don't need me," he said. "But I'm here anyway." She kissed him then, not out of impulse, but with the quiet certainty of someone who'd finally stopped running. When they pulled apart, she looked around the penthouse again. "Is this your way of asking me to stay?" "No," Simon said. "This is my way of asking you to let me stay, wherever you are," she laughed softly. "You're impossible. You're extraordinary." He took her hand then, guiding her toward the far corner of the room where a small table had been set with 2 plates and a covered dish. "Wait," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Is that your favorite? I asked your friend Mia. You tracked down my best friend. She's surprisingly helpful when bribed with chocolate." Rae shook her head, but her smile didn't fade. "You really don't do anything halfway, do you?" Simon lifted the lid, revealing a dish she hadn't had since childhood. "Not when it matters." She sat down across from him, the city glittering behind them and the scent of comfort food filling the air. "I don't know what this is going to be," she said honestly. "Neither do I," he replied. "But I know I want to find out." They clinked their glasses gently, and for the first time in a long time, Rae wasn't waiting anymore. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The rain came in slow, glistening waves against the tall windows of Rae's new studio, a sunlit loft tucked above a flower shop in Soho. Bolts of fabric lined the walls on iron rods, and sketches were pinned in a chaotic, beautiful mosaic behind her work table. She was bent over a design for a bridal editorial when the door creaked open. "I knocked twice," Simon said, holding 2 coffees and a small bakery box. "You were in the zone. You could have just texted," Rae said, brushing a pencil behind her ear. "I like doing things the old-fashioned way." "Showing up, bringing bribes." He handed her the box, and she lifted the lid to reveal 2 cream-filled pastries dusted in powdered sugar. Rae took one and leaned against the edge of her table. "So what's the occasion?" I got the final approval. "The Arts Center is officially opening next month." She paused mid-bite. "You're serious? They're naming the main design studio after you." She blinked. "Are you allowed to do that without asking me?" I didn't. The board insisted. "Apparently, someone's been mentoring 3 of the scholarship students in her spare time. They're talented," Rae said. "All they needed was someone who didn't talk down to them." Simon leaned beside her. "You're building something bigger than you realize." She looked around the space. "It doesn't feel real yet." "It is, every inch of it." He took a sip of his coffee. "I had a meeting nearby and thought I'd steal 10 minutes with you. You didn't have to bring pastries. I wanted to see you smile." She set the box down, walked over, and slipped her arms around his waist. "You always know the right thing to say." "I've been practicing." She glanced up at him. "You're not nervous about the opening. I'm only nervous about one thing." "What's that?" "That you'll start believing you don't need me anymore." She pulled back slightly. "Simon, I don't mean it in a possessive way. I mean watching you become this version of yourself, watching you lead and create and take up space. It's the most incredible thing I've ever seen. But part of me wonders if I'm still part of that world. You didn't just open a door for me. You stood beside me when I walked through it. I didn't lose myself, I found more of me, and you're in all of it." He exhaled, relief softening his expression. "I needed to hear that." She kissed him gently, just once before pulling back. "Come to the gala with me tonight. It's for the design council. Mia's going, and most of the board will be there." "Will there be dancing?" "Yes." "Will you wear the dress you designed last week?" "Only if you promise not to make me twirl in front of investors." "No promises." That evening, the ballroom at the Conrad Hotel shimmered with gold chandeliers and champagne towers. Rae stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down the satin of the deep emerald gown she'd made herself. It hugged her in all the right places, with a neckline that dared confidence and a back that whispered elegance. Simon stepped in behind her, dressed in a velvet tuxedo jacket and a black bow tie. He looked at her through the reflection. "Are you trying to ruin every man's night here?" he asked. "Just yours." Mission accomplished. They arrived at the gala arm in arm, photographers turned, flashes going off as guests whispered. Rae was no longer the girl blending into corners. She was the woman everyone wanted to meet, the one whose work was climbing editorials and gallery walls alike. As the evening wore on, Rae gave a short speech, her voice steady, her words sincere. When she stepped down from the podium, Simon met her at the bottom of the stairs and took her hand. "Marry me," he said quietly. She blinked. "What?" I know it's fast. I know we haven't done this the conventional way, but I can't imagine building a life that doesn't start with you, not someday now. She stared at him, heart hammering in her chest. You're serious. I've never been more. She looked out at the room, then back at him, tears starting to gather in her lashes. Okay. Okay, yes, she whispered. Let's do it. The wedding was held 3 weeks later in the glass atrium of the new arts center. Instead of a string quartet, they had a gospel choir. Rae wore a champagne-hued gown she'd sewn herself, with embroidered constellations stitched into the hem. Mia stood beside her as maid of honor, crying through most of the ceremony. Simon didn't make a grand speech. He simply held Rae's hands and said, "You changed everything," and that was enough. They danced under a canopy of stars, the city humming below. No press, no investors, no pageantry, just the people who mattered and the love they had built in the quiet between ambition and truth. Months later, Rae's name appeared on the cover of a major fashion magazine. Her line was debuting at Fashion Week and the studio had expanded. But when the day ended, she went home to a townhouse in the West Village, where Simon waited with dinner and 1,000 questions about her sketches. They didn't need grand gestures anymore. They had memories, threads woven through the life they chose to build together. One night, curled up on the couch with fabric samples and takeout containers between them, Rae looked up and said, "I used to think needing someone made me weak." Simon touched her cheek. "And now I know it means I'm not alone." He kissed her temple and smiled against her skin. "You never will be."